Welcome back to Philosophy 264 Critical Thinking, Module 2 Material or Informal Fallacies. In this module, we will look at various fallacies mostly concerned with understanding, or the first act of the mind, language. In these fallacies, what you have are mistakes usually in the meaning of terms. These can be organized in different ways. Krefft divides them into the fallacies of language, division, oversimplification, argumentation, induction, procedural fallacies, and metaphysical fallacies. In the first division, we will look at fallacies of language. These deceive through the deceptive or careless use of language, particularly of terms. These are divided into fallacies of equivocation, amphibole, accent, slanting, slogans, hyperbole, and the straw man. Fallacies of equivocation occur when, as we had discussed earlier, a term is used in two very different or unrelated senses. So, one example is that those who are most hungry eat the most. Those who eat the least are the most hungry. Therefore, those who eat the least eat the most. Here, of course, you have a fallacy around the term hungry, which is used in two different senses. In fallacies of amphibole, what you have is usually something in writing where the sense is very unclear. So, for example, the title of a article from a student newspaper, "How to Cook Yourself." Obviously, this has two different meanings. The third is that of accent. Of course, it depends a lot on how we emphasize a term. So, for example, to use that from Krefft, the phrase "I do not," or the sentence "I do not choose to run at this time" can mean very different things depending on where the accent is. I do not choose to run this time. Perhaps he will. I do not choose to run at this time. This has no ambiguity. I do not choose to run at this time, but I can be forced. I do not choose to run at this time, but I can be drafted. I do not choose to run at this time, but I may do so in the future. So here you could see how accent can very much change the meaning of the proposition. There are also fallacies of slanting, where loaded terms are used. It is often, of course, the case where the opponent's views are labeled extremist or out of the mainstream. This, of course, means really nothing. It can be used to basically slant someone's attitude against any various positions. There are also slogans. These, of course, often don't mean anything, such as "Make America Great Again" or "Love is Love." These are, of course, completely meaningless slogans, and they need, of course, to be more precisely defined. There's, of course, the fallacies of hyperbole, which is that of exaggeration. And finally, there's the straw man. This is a very common fallacy by which one paints one's opponent's position in the most ludicrous and ridiculous way, so that it's easily blown down like that of a straw man. The second class of fallacies are those of diversion. These work by diverting people's attention from analyzing or thinking critically about the claims made. Diversion is usually onto the person making the claim or anything other than the claim or the argument itself. These fallacies can be divided into fallacies of ad hominem, which is, of course, against the person. This includes poisoning the well, the tu quoque, and the genetic fallacies. The fallacy ad verecundiam, appeal to illegitimate authority. The appeal to ad baculum, appeal to force. And the appeal to ad misericordiam, appeal to pity. Let's just take these first. There are more. The one ad hominem is basically where you attack the person instead of the argument. And of course, obviously, in normal life, the trustworthiness of someone is something we take into account. But strictly speaking, whatever the person's view, whatever the person might be, whether you like them or not, is irrelevant to the truth or falsity of what they claim. And so, of course, there are various elements of this, such as poisoning the well, in which basically you already, in a sense, cast aspersions upon someone's character before you even address their argument. The tu quoque is you too. That's what it literally means. Well, you also are guilty of the same thing. That may be true, but nevertheless, it is irrelevant to whether the charge is true or not. And the genetic fallacy basically is that the origin of a proposition or a claim actually has absolutely nothing to do with its truth or falsity. So a person of uh, bad character or a person who comes from something that we would consider a very bad origin can make a true statement. If Einstein, as Kreft points out, had been a vicious Nazi and had discovered the theory of relativity only in order to give Hitler the atom bomb to kill his enemies and conquer the world, that would not prove that E does not equal mc squared. So that's an example. Ad verecundiam is appeal to illegitimate authority. Of course, we have to appeal to authorities all the time. Obviously, for example, if I'm going to claim that the Earth is 93 million miles away from the sun, I have to appeal to the authority of astronomers because I am not an astronomer myself. I have not made the relevant calculations, and that is an appeal to a legitimate authority. But if you appeal to celebrities, to movie actors, or to someone's best friend on some sort of issue over which they have no particular expertise, then that is an appeal to illegitimate authority. But of course, this is a very common fallacy. People appeal to what celebrities or others say as some sort of proof that what they're saying is true. Ad baculum is appeal to force. And so you agree with this, this new company policy is good, and anyone who objects will have to look for another job. This is, of course, an appeal to some sort of threat of or force. Or you have to get on the right side of history. This is also an appeal to force. If you do not adapt our policies, you will be, history will force you to agree to it. And also that could also be, as we'll see later, an appeal to ad populum or to popular authority. And then there is the appeal ad misericordiam, appeal to pity. Um, Really, you have to give me an A for this course since my mother died, and I've had all sorts of parking tickets and so forth and so on. And therefore, whatever I wrote on the exam must be true because I've had such a hard time. This, of course, we might have compassion for such a person, but this does not at all imply that what they have written or said or appealed to is true. There's also the appeal to shame, ad ignominiam. You honestly don't believe such a ridiculous theory. How old-fashioned and stupid you are to still think X is true. That is an appeal to shame. Then a very common fallacy is appeal to the masses, ad populum, to the people, including flattery. So you are such an enlightened person for believing this because that's what all the good and all the hip and all the sophisticated people think. Identification, one of you. So why don't you, be one of us and believe what we're saying? Everybody does it. This is self-explanatory. Believe this because everyone believes it or does it. The polls say this is a very, very powerful sort of appeal. We want to, well, we want our opinions, unfortunately, almost naturally want our opinions to conform to what the majority of people think. And so that's why polls are often manipulated in order to influence public opinion. And of course, appeals to snobbery, which is similar to flattery. You want to have your opinions conform to those of what we consider the most sophisticated and educated and smartest people in our society, who don't necessarily believe things that are necessarily true or even coherent. And of course, there's ad ignorantiam, which is appeal to ignorance. Oh, there's no war going on. I haven't heard of it. So this is another sort of fallacy. So this ends part one of fallacies of an informal or material nature. I will continue with more fallacies in the next video. Thank you.